He didn't just try to steal my mother's house, he tried to steal her very language. For years, Ethan told the whole family that our mother, Martha, who was profoundly deaf and 68, was losing it, claiming her custom sign language was just a confused jumble she made up. He thought because I was the quiet graphic designer, the one who just sat at my computer and watched, I was too weak and stupid to stop his scheme. He did not know that 2 years earlier I had spent 300 painstaking hours digitizing every curve, every hand shape, and every unique movement of Mom's language into a proprietary vector font file, her entire linguistic legacy, copyright registered and hidden away. I let him bring the court-appointed psychologist into the living room. I watched him lie and then I made my move. I remember the day Ethan broke the clay sculpture. It was 9 years ago, and I was fresh out of design school trying to find my footing. Mom had made a small abstract ceramic piece she called Promise a Hand with fingers permanently curved in the sign, for that word a sign, unique to our family's dialect. Ethan had been asking her for the deed to the summer cabin, and when she gently signed, "No, you promised to finish college," first he simply reached out, swept the small statue off the shelf and watched it shatter on the hardwood floor. He didn't even yell, he just said, "See. Mom, no big deal. Just clay." While I was rushing to Mom's side to make sure she wasn't crying, he was already walking away, whistling a smug tune, leaving the jagged white shards glittering on the dark wood. That cold, contemptuous act, the destruction of a symbol, taught me the one lesson he never understood. You don't fight a monster by yelling. You fight him by finding a weapon he underestimates. And for me, that weapon was digital. That night, I started the 300-hour process of documenting and digitizing her language. I would turn Martha's legacy into data, an asset he couldn't sweep off a shelf. The air in the living room was thick with Ethan's superficial charm. He wore his realtor uniform, a sharp blue suit, and a tie clip in the shape of a tiny gold house, the uniform of a professional predator. The court-appointed geriatric psychologist, Dr. Blink. Davies was a neutral, well-meaning woman who was clearly overwhelmed. "Thank you for coming," Dr. Ethan said, his voice dripping with faux concern, the sound of a cold actor. "Clara and I are just so worried about Mom. She can't seem to communicate anymore. It's breaking my heart. I worry she needs 24-hour care somewhere safe." He didn't look at Mom. He looked at the psychologist, then flicked his gaze toward me, a tiny, condescending lift of the chin that said, "Watch me win." I sat on the opposite sofa, my back perfectly straight. I didn't shift. I didn't flinch. My eyes stayed locked on my mother, reading her nonverbal cues. She wasn't senile, she was being manipulated. Ethan then produced a stack of laminated cards. They were clearly cheap, printed from an online template. "These are my new simplified sign language cards, Doctor," he explained smoothly. "I took the time to create them so Mom could communicate easier. But look." He held up the first card, showing a standard universal sign for eat. He then performed the sign himself with exaggerated slowness, but with a subtle, crucial error in the wrist rotation. An error that in our family's customized ASL meant lie. "Mom, can you sign eat for the doctor?" he requested, smiling widely. Martha looked at the card, then at Ethan. She signed slowly, but she signed lie. "See?" Dr. Ethan sighed, throwing his hands up in mock defeat. "She can't even do the simplest signs. She signed hungry, but she can't articulate it correctly. She seems confused and agitated." He forced her through 4 more cards, 4 more intentional corruptions of her language. Each time Martha grew visibly more agitated. She was signing true words in her dialect, but to the psychologist it looked like a terrified woman making random nonsensical gestures. When Ethan reached the 5th card, Mom was trembling. She stared at the card, tears welling in her eyes, and then in a flash of raw emotion she signed one word with her whole body. A complex, 2-handed movement that involved a rapid switch in palm orientation. The sign for proof. Ethan didn't notice. He was already packing up the cards, the smugness tightening his jaw. Well, doctor, I think the evidence is clear. I'll have the guardianship paperwork filed by tomorrow morning. But I saw it. The sign for proof. He had tried to overwrite her language, but he had missed one thing: the subtle digital signature in the unique vector points of that sign. It was the same sign that, when digitized, had required me 3 hours just to perfect the kerning and vector balance. In that fraction of a second, I knew that Ethan's cards were not simplified, they were corrupted. They were designed to fail. I felt a coldness settle in my chest, replacing the rising panic. I took a slow breath, aligning my inner focus just as I would, before rendering a massive file. I was not defeated. I was just handed a new piece of data. I stood up, walked to the coffee table, and picked up a notepad and pen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't look at Ethan. I looked only at Dr. Davies. "Excuse me, doctor," I said calmly. "But those cards are incorrect. They are a corrupted dialect." Ethan's head snapped toward me, his eyes blazing. "Clara, what are you doing? Don't contradict the doctor." I ignored him. I turned to the doctor. "My mother and I developed a private custom lexicon over the past 20 years. What Ethan is showing you is a bastardization of that language." I then wrote one single word on the pad in large, clear letters: truth. I held the pad up to my mother. Martha looked at the word, then at me. Her trembling stopped. She looked directly at Dr. Davies, and slowly, deliberately, she signed the custom word for truth. The two-handed movement was flawless, the palm orientation exact. It was the correct sign. The real sign. Dr. Davies blinked, looking from Martha to Ethan, whose face was now a mask of furious, unmasked rage. I see, doctor," Davies stammered. "That is highly irregular, Mr. Thorne. You didn't mention a custom language." Ethan was hyperventilating. "She's lying, it's nonsense. She's distracting you from the fact that I'm filing for full guardianship tomorrow morning. I'll have the paperwork in the court records before 10 a.m. citing your exact findings, doctor." I watched him stalk toward the entrance hall, furiously pulling out his phone to call his lawyer. I made a mental note of the time, 4:15 p.m. I listened to his frantic, arrogant demands into the phone, logging the specific legal code he cited for the guardianship motion. He thought he was winning the next round by moving faster, but all he was doing was giving me the precise data I needed for my counterattack. He thinks he's fighting a graphic designer with a sketchbook. He doesn't know, he just declared war on a digital archivist. Ethan's retaliatory move was swift and merciless. He filed the formal petition for guardianship before 10 a.m., just as he promised, citing the psychologist report and adding a fabricated claim about my unstable finances. But that was just the bait. The true attack, the one meant to cause maximum damage, came 3 days later. The guardianship hearing granted him temporary control of Martha's finances pending a full audit, and Ethan immediately activated his true malice. I was sitting at the kitchen table reading the long, boring legal filings when a notification flashed on my phone, a text from my brother. It was a screenshot of Martha's blue-chip investment account showing a massive liquidation. "I had to do it," Clara, his text read. "Mom had accumulated massive elder debt under your care. I liquidated $150,000 of her stock portfolio to pay it down. You were ruining her. I'm the hero here." My breath hitched. $150,000. It wasn't just money. It was the capital Martha had saved for 30 years from her small private teaching salary meant for any specialized care she might need later. It represented every penny of security she had left. This was an act of financial destruction. I didn't reply. I walked straight up to the attic, the place Ethan always mocked as a useless, dusty junk heap. He was convinced I had no leverage because he controlled the digital realm now. He was wrong. My supposed useless hobby was the reason I was ready. I spent a year, 2 years ago, setting up a virtual private network, connected to my private office server, tucked inside an old, empty stereo console up there. I had claimed it was for better graphic rendering speed, but in reality, it was a stealth monitor. Ethan, the self-proclaimed tech guru, never thought to check the attic's Ethernet port, the one I had secretly routed to the console. I logged into the VPN's management software. The data streamed across my screen, a flood of financial activity that didn't stop at paying debt. While he was publicly posting his heroic text on the family group chat, the image of Martha's account balance reduced to 0, I was watching the digital breadcrumbs. I tracked the $150,000. Ethan had only paid $3,000 to a local utility company. The other $147,000. It had been immediately routed to a crypto wallet transfer service. My eyes scanned the IP address and the transaction description. Transfer to new gaming fund. I cross-referenced the service with a quick search. It was a known offshore service linked to a massive, high-stakes poker network in Las Vegas. This was the core difference between him and me. He thought the lie was enough. I knew the truth was in the traffic. He claimed elder debt, but the data proved intent to steal and fund his gambling addiction. I was staring at undeniable digital proof of felony embezzlement. I walked back down the calm, returning to my core. I picked up my phone. I reread his arrogant text, the one gloating about the negative balance. I typed slowly, making sure every word was a calculated strike. I was giving him just enough truth to trigger his panic and set the next trap. I typed, "You can explain the $12,000 transfer to a Vegas-based crypto exchange when the auditor calls." I chose $12,000 precisely because it was less than the full amount, but specific enough to prove I was inside his system. The response was immediate and violent. The phone rang 3 times. Then a barrage of angry misspelled texts flooded my screen, confirming I had struck the nerve. He was exploding because his carefully constructed facade was cracked. He couldn't deal with the thought that I knew the destination of his dirty money. I turned the phone off. I knew his next move. The moment he realized the digital evidence existed, he would revert to the physical world, trying to erase the source. I had to assume he was on his way home now to find and destroy the VPN. The final piece of the trap was already in place. It wasn't about the VPN, it was about the structure it was built upon. He would accuse me of wiretapping, but I would show the court he was trying to burn the house down. I listened to the silence of the house. I knew he was coming, and I knew exactly what he was coming to destroy. Ethan arrived with the police. He didn't come alone. He brought his attorney, a greasy man named Mr. Finch, and 2 large armed bailiffs. This was his move, using the state's authority to bully me. "Here are the documents," officers, Ethan announced, loudly flashing the restraining order motion at the bailiffs. "My sister Clara Thorne is unstable. She has set up an illegal wiretap in the attic to record my mother and me. I require her immediate removal, and I require the destruction of the evidence." He pointed at me. "She's trying to destroy my mother's reputation. Get her out of the house." "Mr." Finch stepped forward, his face serious. "Ms. Thorne, if you resist, you will be in contempt of court. You must step away from the attic entrance and allow the bailiffs to secure the evidence." The bailiffs, 2 enormous men in heavy vests, took a step toward me. I knew this was the moment of maximum danger, the moment he expected me to break down, cry, and be physically removed from the house I was trying to protect. I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I did not even look at Ethan, whose face was twitching with anticipation. I maintained eye contact with the lead bailiff. "I will not resist," I stated, my voice calm and even. but I cannot allow you to destroy that area for safety reasons." Ethan let out a triumphant manic laugh. "Safety reasons. She's insane. She's delaying you. There's a wiretap in the stereo console. Destroy the wiretap." I ignored him again. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a single thin piece of paper folded in half. I handed it to the bailiff. "Officer, this is a formal dated inspection report from the certified handyman Mr. Proscent." "Alistair Finch," I said, emphasizing the name. "It documents the severely compromised electrical wiring in the attic space, specifically the old exposed insulation and the faulty outlet connected to the stereo console. The handyman filed this report 3 weeks ago." The bailiff, a professional who clearly had no patience for family drama, unfolded the paper and read the heading "Urgent Sever Fire Hazard." "I was not wiretapping, gentlemen," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I was protecting my mother from a house fire based on the findings of this report. If Mr. Thorne orders you to destroy the console and the wiring, he is ordering you to tamper with a major safety violation that, according to this report, could void the home's insurance policy and potentially lead to injury or death." Ethan's face went from smug anticipation to pure horror. This was the brilliant twist I had transformed his attack, wiretapping into his attempt to cover up a safety hazard that risked the entire house. "Finch, what is she talking about?" Ethan hissed at his lawyer. Mr. Finch, who hadn't been consulted on this particular piece of leverage, looked terrified. "A fire hazard. You didn't mention a fire hazard." "Ethan." The lead bailiff immediately stepped back. His priority shifted from a legal scuffle over a wiretap to a tangible life-threatening safety risk. He folded the paper and looked directly at Ethan. "Mr. Thorne, I'm ordering you to cease all action concerning this attic. I will not authorize the destruction of wiring cited as an urgent fire hazard on this report. This now constitutes a potential insurance and safety violation, which requires the presence of the fire marshal and the Homeowners Association Safety Board." Ethan screamed. It wasn't a tactical yell, it was a primal rage. "You set me up, you witch! You set me up!" he shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. He completely broke down in front of the bailiffs, and his own lawyer. "You're the one trying to burn her memories. You are the traitor." I watched the bailiffs exchange a look. Ethan was supposed to be the calm, concerned son. Now he was a screaming maniac, exposed not just as an abuser, but as someone willing to risk his mother's life and home insurance policy to destroy a supposed wiretap. The bailiff took out his radio and contacted his supervisor, clearly stating the words "Fire Marshal requested due to reported severe electrical hazard at subject property." Ethan's attorney, Mr. Finch quickly grabbed Ethan's arm. "We need to leave now, Ethan. This is no longer a civil matter." They retreated the victory, short-lived and brutal. The restraining order motion was dead on arrival, but the humiliation was the real payoff. Ethan had exposed his deep-seated rage and his willingness to commit insurance fraud in a moment of panic. I stood there for a full minute listening to the siren of the approaching fire marshal. I had won the battle for the house, but I knew the cost. Ethan would be enraged beyond reason. He had lost the financial game and the legal game. His next move would be to attack the very thing I valued most, my reputation and my career. He thinks he can destroy the font file by calling it plagiarized, but he doesn't know the font file is the only thing that can destroy his career. Graphic designer would understand. I knew that the complexity of the file itself was my first line of defense. At the hearing, Ethan was impeccably dressed and arrogant. He presented a flimsy, photocopied printout of his own version of the sign language, a crude pamphlet he must have thrown together in an hour. "This is my work, members of the board," he stated, his voice ringing with false righteousness. "Clara is a thief. She used her technical skills to digitize my creative idea, which I developed to help Mom. She stole her senile mother's idea and tried to claim it as her own design. He thought his confidence would be enough. He thought a photocopied piece of paper was equal to a digitally registered vector-based font file. He thought a real estate broker's word outweighed a designer's sworn affidavit. Several members of the board, clearly swayed by his community, standing in aggression, leaned in. They asked me to explain the striking similarity between my submitted work and Ethan's printout. This was the peak of the expectation. They expected me to argue over the subjective nature of design. They expected me to defend my moral character. I did neither. I maintained eye contact with the board's chair, calmly setting aside Ethan's flimsy pamphlet. "The similarity is undeniable, Madam Chair," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through the tension. But I did not steal his idea. He stole mine, and he did a very poor job of covering his tracks. I pointed directly to the printed sheet. If you look closely at the printed sign for agreement, the one he calls the letter A, you will see a subtle flaw. The serif is incorrect. The point where the two strokes meet is characteristic of a widely used free font family, not the unique proprietary vector work that I created. I then dropped the bomb. An amateur would overlook that detail. But more importantly, the physical printout means nothing. The evidence is not on the paper, it is in the metadata. I looked at Ethan. He turned pale. He knew exactly what metadata was, and he knew I had him. I respectfully request I address the board that Mr. Palavinhuri ingain by injury. Thorne's digital file, the source file for his original work, be submitted for immediate metadata analysis. The board approved the request. We waited in silence, while a technician ran the analysis. It took only 5 minutes, but they were the longest 5 minutes of Ethan's life. When the results came back, the technician didn't even need to speak. The screen clearly displayed the fatal truth: Ethan's original file was not only created 6 months after my copyrighted file, but the hidden metadata field showed the last person to edit it. It was my login, and the file was momentarily stored on my personal cloud server, the one he had secretly accessed before attempting to liquidate the stocks in Part 2. He hadn't created a new file. He had copied mine, modified a single vector point to make a crude change, and tried to delete the original. Mr. Thorne, the chair, stated, her voice icy. The metadata confirms you attempted to plagiarize Miss Prubid. Thorne's file. Worse, it appears you accessed her private work and then claimed authorship after the fact. This board is dismissing your complaint and is now opening an investigation into perjury and unethical professional conduct. Ethan's face collapsed. He had played a chess game using the rules of checkers. His license, the very thing that gave him his arrogant community standing, was now under threat. I did not gloat. I simply looked at him, my expression unreadable. I had won the battle for my reputation, but I knew the man. Humiliation like this would trigger the final, most destructive act. I knew he would try to destroy all the proof. I just had to make sure he only destroyed the decoy. The final act of Ethan's destruction was fueled by pure, unadulterated narcissistic rage. Having lost his career, his money, and his reputation, he came for the only thing left: my mother's memories and my future livelihood. This was the moment of scorched earth. I was sitting in my office when the house alarm blared the subtle chime I had set up just for his entry. I heard the unmistakable sound of breaking glass from the living room. He hadn't even bothered with the front door. I didn't panic. I just smiled, a cold, hard, professional smile that never reached my eyes. I stood up and walked toward the sound, calmly pulling out my phone to verify the police were on their final approach. I had called them 8 minutes ago, when I saw his car turn onto the street. I found him in my office, a maelstrom of destruction. He stood amidst shredded paper and overturned drawers, holding 2 things in his hands. In one, he held my current project file, a critical pitch deck for the $50,000 contract with the city's Parks Department, which he ripped in half, the sound like a gunshot. That's 5 months of work, Clara, gone, he sneered. In the other hand, he held Martha's external hard drive, the one containing 50 years of family photos, my childhood memories, and all the original scan data of her sign language lexicon. He didn't just smash it. He brought it down repeatedly, against the sharp metal corner of the desk, the plastic casing shattering, and the internal components grinding with a high-pitched metallic shriek that was final and horrifying. "It's all gone, Clara," he screamed, his face contorted with madness. "Your work and her pathetic, useless memories gone forever. Now you know what it feels like to have your legacy erased." I stopped just inside the doorway. I looked at the desk, not at him. I noted the precise point of impact on the external casing, a deep gouge where the file directories would be stored. He was convinced he had won the moral and emotional war even as he faced legal ruin. "You're wrong, Ethan," I said, my voice quiet, a flat professional tone that mocked his theatrical breakdown. "You destroyed the decoy." I walked over to my main monitor. On the desktop, there was the single, unassuming vector font file folder, the one he had overlooked thinking it was just a font. The real data wasn't in the project files or the external hard drive. I continued pressing an icon on the screen. It was in the font file itself. "Do you remember the license agreement for the vector font file you plagiarized, Ethan? The one you were too arrogant to read?" I opened a screen showing a separate folder labeled DMCA Recovery Auto Sync. The font file's digital rights management, the DRM I customized over 6 months, had a failsafe. I explained the words chillingly precise. Any attempt to digitally alter, delete, or physically destroy a linked asset like that hard drive triggers an automatic creation of an encrypted backup folder of every deleted file, including the pitch deck and all of Martha's 50 years of photos on a separate off-site server in Cheyenne. "You didn't delete the data, Ethan. You confirmed the backup." His eyes darted from the screen to my face, the realization of his catastrophic failure freezing the madness. He let out a choked sound, reaching for the remaining bits of the hard drive on the floor. "And there's one more thing." I finished, reaching for the destroyed hard drive on the floor. I held up the shattered remnants, making sure he saw the destruction he had wrought. "The vector font file's licensing agreement, which you breached in Part 4, states that any attempt to digitally alter or physically destroy a linked copyrighted asset constitutes a breach of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. That hard drive, Ethan, was a linked asset. You didn't just smash plastic. You smashed the law." The front door burst open. 2 uniformed officers responding to the emergency call stood in the hallway. Ethan Thorne, the lead officer, stated, his hand on his weapon. "You are under arrest for breaking and entering felony vandalism of high-value property, $150,000 in documented assets, and destruction of evidence. We have the witness and the wreckage." The checkmate was total. Ethan was dragged away, his screams muffled, as the officers escorted him past the shattered remnants of his own arrogance. He was powerless, humiliated, and facing criminal charges. His real estate broker's license was permanently revoked the following morning. I watched the patrol car lights fade down the driveway. I did not cry. I did not feel rage. I walked back to my mother, who was sitting quietly in the kitchen reading a book. She looked up at me, and with her hands she signed the word truth, the unique sign that only we knew. I signed it back to her, a gesture of shared victory and unbroken legacy. The house was calm. The silence of the house was no longer the silence of enduring pain, but the silence of peace, the peace earned by being 3 steps ahead of the monster. We kept the house. We kept the memories. He tried to delete her language, but instead the language became the vault that deleted him. Now we rebuild not what he destroyed, but what he couldn't touch. If this story of silent strength and meticulous planning resonated with you, let me know in the comments below. Have you ever had to use a useless skill as your secret weapon? Like this video if you believe in the power of quiet preparation. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that the underestimated often win. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about justice and intelligence.